Good morning. Okay, that was weak. That was extremely weak. Good morning. That's more like it. All right, you're in Vegas. Be happy about that. It's interesting that the folks who are really energetic or actually made the extra walk from the mile and a half you had to come from your hotel room. The lazy ones, I'm going to assume, are over here. Not really. I'm just joking on you. So I see my coworkers are struggling in late. So good morning. My name is Jarvis Davis. I am a principal consultant with CDW, based out of the Twin Cities area. Main focus is on Config Manager, getting into more system center stuff as well. And so this session is titled The Why of Config Manager. And so in years past, in my times here at MMS, there's been a ton of sessions on how to do stuff. How do you do X? How do you do Y? How do you do this, that, and the other? But not a lot of sessions on why would I choose to do that? Why would I choose to do it this way or that way? And that's what this session is all about, is why would you choose different things? So, by way of agenda, let's talk about what this session is and what this session is not. I want you to be satisfied when you walk out the door. I want you to be happy. Quite honestly, I want all 9s on the eval. I want you happy. So, here is what we are going to do and what we're not going to do. This is a broad and fast-paced session. We will, I promise you, be changing topics every 5 to 10 minutes. So we are going to change. If you don't like what I'm talking about right now, give it 5 or 10. We're going to switch something else. Maybe the next topic will be more in line with what you're wanting. The session is designed to answer the question of why. Not how, but why. We are going to get into some of the hows. Because to talk about the whys, I got to talk about the hows. But it's not really an in-depth session. We are going to deep dive on some topics. I do have 4 live demos planned. So we are going to dig deep a little bit. Mainly this is around helping you make decisions in your environment. You took a look, okay, if I'm going to do one of the ones we're going to get into, actually the second one we're going to get into is packaging a program or application. Right? Which one do I go? What situations would I do one or the other? You're probably going to use both. But for what situations would you do one or the other? One note, we are talking about native config manager functionality only. I am not dealing with third-party products. There are some great products like 1E, Adaptiva, etc. I do talk about some stuff that they address later in the session. I will not be addressing those products here. I'm only addressing native config manager functionality. Again, this is not really a specific how-to, it's a why. So if that's really not what you're looking for, maybe it's time to go find another session. I know there's a great session on boundaries down the hallway that, quite honestly, if I weren't speaking right now, that's where I would be. With that said, let's kind of get off into our first topic, which is a simple one. By the way, if anyone is having trouble hearing, if the audio is off for whatever reason, please let me know during the session and we can do something about it. Previous session that I had, people complained in the evals about the audio, and I can't do anything about it then. If you have trouble with the audio, let us know, and the guy in the back can definitely take care of that. He's promised me there's no audio problems in this room, though. So, content source location and folder structure. So so all of your packages, programs, applications, whatever you do, OSD stuff, has to have content stored somewhere. I will admit this is probably the least technical of anything that I address. So don't think the entire session is going to be like this. It's surprising how many clients I go to that when I get in there, things are not organized. Content is just all over the place. And so let's talk about, first of all, where does that content live? But also how do you organize it? So first off, on the source files location, essentially you're going to use a UNC path. But where does that UNC path live? Is it a server share, or do you use something like a DFS route? So on a server share, your problem there is what happens when that server dies? The server is no longer available. All right? My share name is whack server name whack share name. I move it to a new server, and immediately all of my packages start redistributing. I don't know about you, but I've seen very few companies whose WAN infrastructure could handle that. That's a problem. That's a big problem. So I don't like using server shares for that. I like using a DFS share. The reason I like using a DFS share is the name is obfuscated. It is domain name, wax share name. Fine, domain name ain't going to change no time soon. Or if it does, I got bigger things going on. And I got other issues to deal with then as well. And at that point, if the server dies, who cares? I move it to a different target. UNC path stays the same. My distribution does not have to go out again. Note about this, I am not talking about replicated DFS. I am not talking DFSR, only namespace. I don't need it to replicate out to everywhere. I just need the name to be obfuscated. Now, as for where the target should reside, I don't care. I could care less. I've had clients ask me that. My response is, you pick. Your file server, another folder on the config manager server, I could care less. It just needs to exist somewhere that's backed up. I had one client recently, about a month ago, actually asked me the question, so if all you need is the namespace to be obfuscated, could I use the net logon share? Technically, I guess it would work from a permission standpoint, except that that's replicated all your domain controllers. You got 300 gig of data going out to all your DCs. Yeah, that's probably not something you want. So with that said, let's now look at folder structure. At client locations that I have been to, one of the predominant things that I have seen is that app source, the applications, the updates, whatever, are just spread everywhere. There's no organization at all. Some folks have it well organized. I've seen some that literally it was every drive they had, wherever it happened to, the source happened to be when they created the package, that's where the source was for that package. It might be on the desktop. I've had someone create the source folders inside the config manager install directory. Bad idea, number one. Yes, there is a share already there. Don't use it. Let that stuff be just a config manager install. And you have to organize that. Over time, I've developed a working structure that I will run from, that I will use. And I'm going to demonstrate that here. I'm going to at least show you what that is. Is it going to be the right thing for every location? No. But will it work as a starting point? Yeah. You can adjust what you see as necessary. So let's take a look. Our first demo, which first of all, let me zoom it. Get that going. First of all, let's take a look at DFS, just very, very quickly here. So note here, this is on my domain controller. I've got a, here the names, that's the wrong one. Okay, that's also the wrong one. Sorry about that, guys. Control. There we go. So there is my domain name. My Demo Labs domain name is Demo Lab. Funny. Or not. And so when all of my package source goes to whack.corp.demolab.com/seccmdsl. SECMDSL is a term that I have been using for 5 years or so. It is SECM config manager, obviously. DSL, who can tell me what DSL stands for? One hand over there. What's it stand for? What's that? Close. So it's an ITIL term for definitive software library. DSL, definitive software library. It is the definitive source where I'm going to keep all of my data. By the way, who should have permission to that? Freaking no one. Your config manager server computer account should have access to it. A couple of your senior config manager people or your app packagers should have access to it. Your help desk, no way in heck. Do you know why? I don't want them putting it on a freaking USB stick and carrying it around. I want software deployed via config manager, not via USB stick. If you give them access to it, I guarantee they're going to make a copy of it. Will that copy ever be updated? Nope. It will never be updated. Therefore, when you update it on your config manager server, they're still installing the 2-version back version. You don't want that. With that said, so my demo lab server is pointing to the target on this guy, the namespace, if you can see here, is CMO1 / SCCMDSL. There is a share on my config manager server. All right? Nobody has access to it. I don't reference that one directly. I reference the DFS share. So that is the DFS side of things. Now let's flip over to my config manager server and just take a look. So definitive software library, root of the D drive. Inside that guy, that file is not supposed to be there. I have essentially 3 top-level folders: apps, OSD, and updates. Want to take a wild stab at what's in those 3? Inside apps, this is where I'm going to put each of my apps. Have a good naming standard here. I don't care what your naming standard is. Figure one out and stick with it. Enforce it. Since only 1 or 2 people should have access to this, it should be reasonably easy to enforce as long as you're the one, as long as you're careful about it yourself and you don't allow yourself to do crazy stuff. Note in particular, I've got various versions of like Notepad++. I'm using that in a demo later. Note also, I've got one that's an app-v version. So I'm going to notate, in general, the way I do it is, if it's just a folder name, just an app name, it's probably an exe or an MSI install. If it's a virtual app, I'm going to put app-v at the end. That way I know that's my virtual app. It's very easy for me when I'm looking at the source to know exactly what I'm looking at. Moving up, OSD, these are just packages that are specific to operating system deployment. I've got my custom settings package there, driver packages, driver source, because you need to have both. So I got my driver source, I import that into the driver package. My MDT toolkit, because I integrate MDT into my config manager install. OS images, OS installer. I'm naming these based on what the console says. In 2007, these are named slightly differently because they were named around what was in the config manager console. When I look at OS installers, I know where that should be in the console, in the OS installers node. OS images, it's in the OS images node. USMT, again, that's the user state migration tool package. So very clear around what these guys are. These are all things that are specific to OSD, not really used anywhere else other than OSD. Updates, your updates packages, that's where they would exist. So this is fairly simplistic. It does not address dev versus prod, but it'll be easy to do so. So if you got a dev team, give them their own DFS share. They do all their dev work, then somebody copies it from dev to prod when you create the production package. That's what actually goes out to all of your DPs. So you can handle that route as well. So that is the end of the first demo, such that it was. And so now, next. Oh, I never switched to the demo slide. Packaging program or application. So packages and programs have been around for a very long time. Were they in like the very first version of SMS? I don't even know. I wasn't working with the product back then. They've been very helpful, reasonably effective at getting apps out there, doing your software distribution. They had problems though. The new app model is different. It has a lot of logic built to it, intelligence built into it. I call packages and programs dumb application versus smart application. I don't mean dumb as in you're dumb to use them or anything, but they have no intelligence. There's no logic built into a package and program. It's just content source and install string. So go to this path and execute this program is your package and program. Versus an application has a lot of logic built into it. So why would you choose one over the other? So here's kind of the breakdown between the two. Package and program, obviously they are very, very easy to create. You can get one done if you know what you're doing in less than 1 minute. From pointing the source folder to getting the package and program done, you could probably do it if you're very quick in less than 1 minute. They're very fast. The problem with package and program has always been targeting that install to the right systems, whether it be a system-based install or a user-based install. God forbid a user-based install of the package and program. The problem has been targeting it at the right systems because there's no logic built into this guy. So I've got to have all that logic built into the collection query. So my collection query has to say, okay, I want to make sure everybody has Acrobat 11. So show me every system that does not already have Acrobat 11. All right, how do I do that? Well, I got to make sure hardware inventory ran. Okay, that's the first step. Okay, by default, that's 7 days. So I can be 7 days out of date right there. But even if it did just run, when's the last time the collection refreshed? Well, by default, that's 24 hours. So I could be 8 days out of date with my package and program stuff by default. I could crank those down at a higher processing cost on my server. And I've seen a lot of companies that have done that. As a matter of fact, I was doing a huge migration for a company one time, and we cranked that sucker down to 10 minutes. It was cranking like a mad dog. Got it done. We made sure we cranked it back up later because it was a time critical thing. But that targeting with package and program has always been painful on the system side. What about user side? Okay, think about this. With package and program, it's dumb. It has no intelligence built in. I deploy Creative Suite to a user. They log into 10 computers. Yeah, there's my licensing gone. That's a problem. It's a big problem, especially when true-up time comes. Visio project, that'd be expensive. And so very, very time-consuming, very, very error-prone. It's still useful in certain situations. Operating system deployment packages are great examples of that. Custom scripts packages are great examples of that. On the application model side, if you are doing user-based deployment, it's required. If you want to do app catalog, that's how you have to do application models to do app catalog. No discussion. The app model is, I will just go ahead and give you the heads up, it is more time consuming to set up initially. No doubt. It is more time consuming. It does require more effort up front because you're putting all the intelligence into the application. You're making sure it knows, okay, how do I know if I've already installed? What are my dependencies? Am I superseding something else? Things of that nature. And so those are different things that come up there. Helps you with the dependencies and the versioning and upgrading. And so let's take a look at the app model real quick. So first, let's just quickly take a look at just a packaging program. I mean, this is almost a waste of time because everybody's seen these guys. But on the off chance that there's somebody in here who has not seen a packaging program. So opening up Audacity, little quick freeware audio program. Basically, I've got my content source. There's where that is. I know the content locations. It's on that distribution point. Really no logic built in there. Going down to the program, install silently. And it's got the command line to install very silent, which way I want it to show up, a little bit of info around the requirements about how long I want to let it run, if I know specific operating systems I want to let it run on or not. But by and large, that's all you got. Now, flipping over to my applications node, on here, note that I've got two Notepad++ apps. I've got the old and the new. So in the new one, so I got my old version, my new version. The new one is superseding the old one. So let's go into this guy. And what you'll see from the very beginning is I've got a lot more tabs, number one. I can do stuff around date published, who's the owner of the application, who the support contacts, if they're not me, how I want this guy to show up in the app catalog. So when a user goes to the website, searches on the application, say, I need something like this. I think it starts with Notepad, or it's got a plus in it. I can search on that, and I can find that to bring that application up. Deployment types I'm going to come back to in just a second. Content locations again. There's your distribution point that this guy is on. Supersedence. Hey, there's my old and my new. So if you find the old one, or if someone asks for the old version, install the new one instead. So that is your supersedence aspect. Getting into deployment types, I've got two. I've got one, the script is your basic exe install. So content, again, I got my content source for this guy. Note the content source is on the deployment type, not on the application. So I can have multiple deployment types per application. I want to install different ways based on different criteria, different logic or intelligence that's built into the application. So with this guy, I'm installing Notepad 632. My program, again, my silent install string, my uninstall program. I got a detection method. And on this guy, because it's an exe, the way that I chose it was to search in the Notepad++ folder for the Notepad++ exe and make sure that the version is at least 6.3.2. If it's greater than that, it says, hey, this thing's already installed. I'm going to stop. I'm not going to do anything here. So right now, note, the detection methods, these rules and stuff are evaluated at deployment time, in real time. I'm not dependent on collection refresh. I'm not dependent on hardware inventory. It's just real time as the app is deploying. I no longer have that problem. And honestly, it makes my deployment of systems a lot easier because I can deploy to a much broader group knowing it's only going to affect the ones I want it to affect. I have less concern about accidentally hitting things I don't want to hit. So there's my detection method. Moving over, I got requirements on this guy. The requirement is I want this to be the user's primary device. So if it's the user's primary device, install this version. If not, don't do this deployment type if it's not the user's primary device. Dependencies, this one has none because it's an exe. I got no dependencies on this guy. Now, let's flip over to the AppV deployment type. This guy is very different. He's an AppV guy. If you look, this is an AppV 4 package. It references the manifest.xml. On the requirements node, I got two here. One, I want to make sure this guy only does on a certain operating system. I also want to make sure that the primary device is false. So this is not the user's primary device. I want to do the AppV version. So I could deploy this application out regardless of where the user logs in. If it's the user's primary device, their primary laptop, it installs the exe version. If it's not their primary device, it does the AppV version. It's deployed per user. It's not installed in the system. I haven't screwed my licensing. Obviously, it doesn't apply for Notepad++, but Creative Suite, Visio, Project, etc., it would apply there. So I maintain my licensing by doing the app model. On the dependency side, what's the dependency for an AppV package? The AppV client. What if I deploy this guy out to a system that doesn't have the AppV client? It'll fail unless I tell it the AppV client is a dependent package. And if you don't find it, install it first. Automatically install the dependency. That way I always succeed. Score. That's fantastic. My package and program stuff has gotten a lot simpler, or my software distribution out to my clients or my users has gotten dramatically easier as a result of this. Is it more time to set up? Yes, no doubt. I spent a little bit of time yesterday afternoon making sure these things were set up correctly. It took me a while. Package and program, I was done in about a minute. This one took me a little bit longer. But my management going forward, managing that process going forward, I don't got to worry about it. I can deploy this guy one time, not be concerned about it. As a matter of fact, I have deployed it. So let's take a look. Let's flip over to my Windows 8 client, log in as Workstation, who I have deployed this guy out to. Workstation guys, you can't trust all that much. They put crazy junk like that on their screen. I'm just joking. I like you Workstation guys. You keep me busy. So let's open up Internet Explorer. I got the home page of this guy set to my app catalog. And when it comes up, you're going to see that it takes a few seconds to load the first time. Don't fail me now, baby. There we go, Notepad++. So this computer is this user's main system. I'm going to take a risk. I did not actually click install yesterday. So if this part fails, I have not tested this. This is not supposed to be part of the demo, but value add. Let's be gutsy. Is it going to install? Preparing installation, evaluating requirements. May take several minutes. Status complete. So application has started. And it is downloading and installing software. And it failed. Like I said, this is not supposed to be part of the demo, so I should have not clicked install. Should have thought my own advice through before I did that. But again, that wasn't supposed to be part of the demo. So now let's take a look at our next section: SQL installation. Where do you put it? Do you keep it local or send it remote? Do you keep SQL on box with the config manager server, or do you have a remote SQL server? And with remote SQL server, is that SQL server, that remote SQL server, is it dedicated to config manager, or is it a shared SQL server, like a huge gigantic cluster that the DBA team manages and has 15 other databases on it? So, SQL local or remote. If your total client count is greater than 50,000, remote is kind of required according to the documentation. Who in here has more than 50,000 clients? 1, 2, 3, 4. All right, the rest of you, that's not a requirement then. So the vast majority, that does not apply. That does not affect. Added complexity. There are extra permissions required as a result of that. There is, you got to make sure your network speed and latency is fine for that. It's a lot more likely that changes will occur on the remote SQL box that will have an impact on config manager functionality. You don't control that SQL server, most likely. Is there a chance that your DBA team may have some newfangled thing that they want to do that they have not run by you? That never happens, does it? No. Network team also never makes changes and fail to tell you, do they? Network's never the problem. But magically, it just kind of starts working again once you complain about it. So what about the situation where, okay, I've seen this statement many times at clients. My SQL team requires that all databases be on our massive SQL cluster. Anybody have that situation? Oh yeah, a lot of folks. That short post there is my blog, verbalprocessor.com. I posted on this a couple of times, mainly around a security concern with that. Think about this. In a remote SQL situation, the permissions required that I mentioned up there, the permissions that I mentioned is that the config manager server account has to be an admin on the remote SQL. Has to be in the local administrators group. Okay? You're a config manager admin. You've got local administrator rights on the config manager server, right? You don't have admin rights on the SQL server, right? Wrong. Because it is trivial to run a command prompt as local system, which does have rights on the SQL server, and you have God rights on the SQL server now. You tell that to your DBA team, they break out into hives and tell you to take your freaky weird database somewhere else. I very rarely had a SQL team want to bite off on that. And this is actually the demo that I've been looking forward to. So, here is what we're going to do. Let me pull up my section here to make sure I go through the right process here. So I've got SQL Management Studio open here on my config manager server. I don't have remote SQL in my environment, so I'm mimicking this to a certain extent. My database server is on my config manager server. My Windows 8 client, my workstation, is part of the local administrators group on my config manager server. So that's how I'm mimicking this. So when I do the PS exec, I'm going to be on my Windows 8 client that does have admin rights on my SQL server. I'll be logged in as workstation. that does not have admin rights on my config manager server. So one thing you'll note if I expand databases is, in addition to my config manager database, I've got one called HIPAA. You think they want to protect that? Dang right they want to protect that. So I want to protect my HIPAA database from modification, from possibly going down, anything like that, right? Okay, now let's switch over to my Windows 8 client and take a look at something. So Windows 8, again, just as a reminder, I'm logged in with somebody who has this as their start screen. Do you trust that? This is my 4-year-old son's start screen. Okay, I wouldn't trust anybody like this to have access to anything on my database server. So now, first of all, let's start WinX, command prompt as local admin. Zoom it, bull hockey. Okay, I thought Zoom it was on this machine. I apologize. I thought Zoom it was here, and I don't have it. So hopefully you can see that a little bit. I'm not able to actually zoom in there. If I do a who am I, you'll see that I am logged in as Demo Lab Workstation. I have admin rights on this box. I have admin rights on I do not have admin rights on the config manager server. But I am now going to run psexec -I -s interactive system cmd.exe. So now let's minimize the other command prompt. Who am I? nt-authority/system. Everything I execute from this command prompt now runs as local system of this Windows 8 server. So let me switch over to my demo folder, and I'm going to map a drive to the SQL server. Switch to the J drive. Hey, look, there's HIPAA database. Check that out. Let me now, let's see. Actually, let's run an MMC. Again, still running as local system. Add snap-in. Services. For another computer. CMO1. Okay. Services, standard. Let's scroll down to, where are we at? SQL Server. Stop. Let's just stop right there. Seriously. You want a guy with that start screen being able to stop a freaking service on your massive SQL server? Heck no! My gracious. But let's keep going. How about if we do this? Move. HIPAA 2. Temp. I've just killed the HIPAA database. So let's now, let's flip back over to our config manager server, hit F5. Oh, I forgot to start the service. Thank you. Funny thing is, when I was practicing the demo, I forgot to do that every time. So service is now started, back over here. Hey, recovery pending. Imagine that. The database doesn't exist anymore. You're going to have a hard time with that HIPAA database. So, think about that. I've got this mapped out on my blog, in the blog post that I mentioned there, about how you can do that. And, that, quite honestly, that puts the fear of God in SQL guys. They see that, and they're like, look, I don't want that junk on my shared SQL box. Take this freaky thing somewhere else. You will win the argument. I've only seen it fail one time with a defense contractor, believe it or not. It's kind of odd. I don't understand it, but all right, whatever. So that was kind of interesting. So, next topic. I said every 5 to 10 minutes. That was actually, I think, the longest topic I have. That may have been a little bit more than 10. To CAS or not to CAS? That is the question. Do you have a client administration site, a central administration site? Okay, I asked a question. Do you have one or not? Somebody does. Okay? Okay, so let's think about this. Why do you need a CAS? There are specific situations when you need a client administration site. That is around scalability. You have more than one primary site. So, when do you need more than one primary site? This should be entertaining. Who in here has more than 100,000 clients? 1, 2, 3, 4. Okay. There's a lot of, okay, someone didn't raise their hand earlier because I said 50,000 clients earlier for SQL Remote and 4 people raised their hand. I got 6 this time. Either new people came in or somebody wasn't paying attention earlier. I don't know which. So, all right, you got more than 100,000 clients. Congratulations. You automatically qualify for CAS because from a scalability standpoint, you can have 100,000 clients per primary. You need more than one primary, you get a CAS. Happy for you. Good luck. You've got extra complexity to deal with in your environment. My recommendation always is keep your design as simple as possible. Tomorrow morning, 10:15, I have a session on hierarchy design, or specifically hierarchy simplification with Config Manager 2012. One of my mantras is keep it simple as possible. If you don't need a CAS, don't put one in. So, with that said, some of you have 100,000 clients. The next thing on the list, who has more than 10,000 Windows embedded? I did not expect to see a single hand. Good. All right. Who has, I laugh at this, who's got more than 50,000 Mac clients? 25? 10? Seriously. There's several that got more than 10,000. You've got to be the people that are over 100,000 clients. I didn't think I would even get to be 10,000. That's entertaining. Okay, so you got more than 10,000. But if you got more than 50,000, that's a requirement. Apparently, a primary can handle up to 50,000 Mac clients. You got 10, all right? That doesn't apply to you. More than 250 secondary sites or distribution points. There's a possibility there, okay? But how many DPs can be hanging off of a secondary? Yep, you got to have a lot. Matter of fact, I think the total is like 5,000 total distribution points when you do that math. So you got to have a heck of a lot of sites in order to get to that point to have more than one primary because of location size. In general, a very, very, very tiny percentage of clients will ever need a CAS. What about the situation where that we heard before was, I want to put one in just in case. It was always a bad argument. With ServiceSpec 1, I can now attach a primary to a CAS after the fact. Now that argument is completely gone away. There's zero reason for putting in a CAS for a just-in-case scenario. General recommendation is assume you don't need a CAS. During this session, by the way, predominantly I'm going to be talking about there's one way to do it, there's another way to do it. In some scenarios like this one, I'm going to make a hard recommendation. Assume you do not need a CAS. When requirements come in that require a second primary, then you put in a CAS. But make it be based off of either technical requirements or business requirements, not just because it looks cool. Okay. Folders inside the Config Manager console. When they announced a couple of years ago, when they were calling Config Manager 2012 vNext, they said, vNext, you're going to have folders in the Config Manager console, specifically in collections. I clapped. I cheered. I was very happy because I'd had so many sub-collections that were really just folders and all this kind of garbage because collection security was kind of weird and you didn't really have folders like that. There's a reason that they didn't exist that way. And I was very happy about that. Well, I don't like them anymore. I don't cheer anymore. So here's why. Whoa, tripping over the speaker. I actually joked with the sound guy the other day when I was doing my tech check that if I came up here and like tripped off the stage, it could be kind of entertaining. So reasons why you would and would not use folders in the Config Manager console. A deep folder structure can actually make it more difficult to find stuff. I was at a client that had a very deep folder structure around everything. There were folders that had one item inside them. Seriously, do you need a folder for that? One package inside a folder, and it was buried like 8 levels deep. They had duplicate packages in their environment because they couldn't find the first one. It was easier to create a new package than to locate the one they had created before. That's entertaining. Not good, but it's entertaining. Until you go to try to find that package, you spend half an hour and then give up and create it new. So that was one thing. The security model does not apply to folders. You can do role-based security all day long. Anybody that logs into the console will see the folders. They'll be empty. Hell, interestingly, they can still put stuff in it. Security doesn't apply. So they can still put stuff in your folder. I don't want that. Instead of doing a lot of folders, consider a good naming standard and stick to it. I know yesterday there's a great session by Chris Knackers and Kent Agerlin. And Kent is a fan of folders, Knackers is not. And Kent's statement was about a naming standard was it lasts about 5 minutes. Okay, I can accept that. I still don't like folders. Here's why. The search function is not recursive of folders. You can search at the top level. It does not search inside subfolders. It only searches the folder you're currently in. That's freaking useless. That's just, I'm sorry, that's something that needs to change. That's a design change request for the config manager team. Now, with that said, reasons you would use folders. Some high-level folders are helpful. Dev and prod, prime example. Some, just for a high-level definition, that can be helpful. Maybe I've got a folder for my utility collections. Maybe I got a folder for all of my software distribution collections to separate them from my utility collections, to separate them from my operating system deployment collections, to separate them from my updates collections, or my collections that exist solely for the purpose of role-based access control. So maybe I got folders for very high-level things, but I'm not deeply nesting them. Maybe I got folders for separating workstation and server because those teams typically don't like each other. But if you use them sparingly. And so let's take a look at console folders. So inside my config manager environment, and this machine, I know I do, has Zoom it on. So inside here in my user collections, currently I don't have any folders, but I can right-click, folder, create folder, blah. There's my blah folder. Am I going to use it? Nope, because I don't like them. But I know over here, so let's flip back over to device collections, and I got a lot of built-in collections that are already there, but I've got some extra ones that I've also added here. So let me just kind of show you. So I can search on comp, and it shows up all the collections that have the word comp in it. So computers. I could do work, and it pulls up workstation clients. Great. Let me pull up servers. Now note, util workstation clients got found there because the limiting collection was all desktops and server clients, which includes the word server. So the search function is actually very, very handy. It works very, very well. Now, here's one trick. I've got somewhere on my server, I've got a system or a collection with the word find in it. I try to find, and I can't find it. Why can't I find it? It might be in a folder somewhere. So let me kind of dig through folders and see what I got. So let's see. Device collections. I'm hiding down here. Oh, there it is. I found him now. He was lost. Now I found my collection. And now, if I were to now move this guy, I got 0 chuckles at all out of that. I worked hard on that. Nobody thought it was funny. I am so sad. Not really. So now he's up here. Finally, I'm lost. If I go back up to search now, find, and I can find him now. So the search function, like I said, not recursive with folders. That's my primary beef with folders. Aside from the fact that deep structure can actually make it more challenging to locate things. And next, task sequences. Who in here is doing operating system deployment? with task sequences. Wow. Good job. Who said that? Why wouldn't we? Exactly. Why wouldn't you? Exactly. You can use Ghost. That's the laugh I was looking for. So, task sequences. It's not a matter of if, it's a matter of what kind. Do you use a multiple simple task sequences or a single flexible task sequence that can handle multiple scenarios? Think about operating system deployment. I got 3 scenarios. Bare metal, refresh, replace. Bare metal, new computer, new user, just get her done. Refresh. I have a system, it's got XP, 7, whatever. I'm deploying a new operating system on it. I want to maintain that user state, bring it back over. Replace. Old computer, new computer, essentially bare metal followed by user state replacement on this side. But I can have a single task sequence that handles all 3 scenarios based on different logic and criteria built in that. Or I can have a bare metal task sequence and a refresh task sequence and a replace task sequence, and I can manage all 3 of those separately. Why would you choose one over the other with that? So, I've already talked through that slide. First of all, the simple task sequences, again, they're easy to create. You can do it very quick. There's no logic to them at all. It's just do these tasks just like this every time. Get it done. They're fast. They move quick. The trick is they can be more work to maintain. Because if I make a change in one, okay, think about this. I got my 3 production, bare metal, refresh, replace. I've got my 3 dev, or maybe multiple dev task sequences. I make a change up here, or 4 or 5 changes up here. I got to remember, okay, where did I put those? I just got lost. So there are a lot more work to maintain moving forward. With that, you also have you might choose a single task sequence if you have either a need or a desire to maintain multiple deployments and the corresponding collections. Just my way of functioning, I don't get this other stuff. I don't get the complexity. I want to keep it simple. I want to have a collection that's just bare metal. I dump a system in there, and it does this, blah, blah, blah. And I know that's what's going to happen to that one. All right, maybe. Maybe that's one reason you would do it. On the single logic-driven task sequence, they can be extremely flexible. A single task sequence to rule them all. That is one possibility. They are harder to create and understand the logic of them. You dig into them, you got to look at the options tab. That's my definition of a task sequence is do this in this order under these conditions. That conditional is the options tab. You can have a heck of a lot of conditions in there. You can have some really fantastically complicated stuff in that options tab. The MDT Integrated Task Sequence Wizard does a fantastic job of giving you a great starting point for getting that single logic-driven task sequence. Let's just say the guys who created the MDT toolkit, they got brains. They look at VB and PowerShell like it's English. I don't understand people like that. I can do VB and PowerShell, not like that. They're beyond me in that skill set. A single logic-driven task sequence is easier to maintain regarding changes, because I'm only changing one. I just got to remember to put it in one spot. Good to go. They are also easier with deployments because only a single collection or deployment is necessary. Instead of having multiple collections, multiple advertisements / deployments, I can do it just in one spot. So, actually, I didn't actually have a demo slide there, but I did create a quick, just to show you kind of the difference there. Task sequences, here's my bare metal only task sequence. Very, very simple. It's just quick and dirty. Get her done. Format the drive, partition the disk, partition, format, lay down the OS, join the domain, install a couple of apps, and then go from there. So it gets the job done. So this is the default MDT task sequence that's very flexible. Can handle all scenarios. There's a lot more there. There's a lot more logic there. One of the things in particular that I like are the sanity check items. Things such as the validate step. In particular, this last one over here. Ensure the current OS to be refreshed is a client OS. If I deploy Windows 7 to a server, freaking stop. Don't let me do that. Last August, bank in Australia, big outage. Second paragraph of the news article, System Center Configuration Manager mentioned by name. What happened? Someone deployed a task sequence to what was equivalent to the All Systems Collection. Bricked the data center. That helps. The president of the company, very large company, I will not mention who it is, president of the company who did that flew to Australia to make nice. You dang right she did. All right. Moving back over. Content location at remote offices. Who in here is a single location? 1, 2, 3, 4. Okay, not many. Most of you got WAN spots. You got to put stuff out into WAN connections. You got to handle content at remote locations. You have various options for that. Your options are, well, okay, so first of all, your typical business requirements. I need to supply deployment content, whether it be apps, updates, operating system deployment, whatever. I got to supply that content to all of my locations or to certain content at certain locations. Regardless, I got to get content out there. I also need to control the impact on the WAN. Who in here has all of your locations have gigantic honking WAN? One. I do know of one location. My buddy here in the front row, he was at a client. He calls me up. He says, their WAN is 10 gig fiber. 55 locations. They owned 10 gig fiber. Dude, that's insane. That's awesome. That's expensive. So the other aspect is with that aspect of getting it out to the remote locations, I need to have timely deployment. What timely means varies. That's a business decision for you to make. Okay? Not a technical decision, it's a business decision. How long is acceptable for someone to wait for X package or update or OS or whatever? My options for my remote locations are a remote distribution point. So they come across the WAN pipe to get their content. If you got really fast WAN, great. 55 locations connected by 10 gig fiber. Do I need a DP at each of those? Nope. Come across the WAN. The WAN's faster than the LAN. Get her done. So I could have an on-site DP. I got a distribution point at that remote location. That's also an option for me. New to Service Spec 1. I can have a DP in Azure or Azure or however you want to say that word. I don't freaking care. So I can have a cloud DP. So why would you choose one over the other? Here's your options. For a remote DP, if you have a fast point-to-point connection between that office and the nearest DP, you might choose this option. If operating system deployment is not required at that remote office, if OSD is required, I doubt you want to do that over a WAN pipe. You probably want to have that local. And if you're less concerned about the speed of deployment, if your business case scenario says it's okay for them to wait for the content to come across the wire, and your network team is not going to try to string you up if you have all that content coming across the wire. They get a little testy about stuff like that. I might have an on-site distribution point if my point-to-point connection is slow from the nearest location. If operating system deployment is required, and especially if a fast deployment time is required. If I got to get that content out now, when someone asks for the app, it installs quickly. I'm probably going to need an on-site DP for that. Now, cloud DP. If my point-to-point location or a point-to-point connection to my nearest location is slow, but my internet connection is fast. So I got split tunnel. I got a T1 back to the MPLS. I got cable or 10 meg or whatever out to the internet. So I'm faster to the internet than I am to my nearest point-to-point. Okay? I could pull it from Azure a lot faster. The other aspect is if the aggregate speed of all of your remote distribution points, all the WAN for them, is significantly greater than the WAN to that nearest DP, to that headquarters location where they're going to be pulling their content from, you could easily overwhelm that internet connection back to your corporate site. Maybe I want to offload that over to Azure instead, have them pull from Azure instead. This, by the way, would be a terrible situation if all of your remote sites had to come through your headquarters location and get to the internet, because then you're killing it twice. You're totally messing things over that way. Cost is also a possibility, and that cuts both ways. So if I have an on-site DP, I got to have server, license, etc. costs for having that on-site DP. If my DP is in Azure, I got the Azure cost. That cost could be fairly reasonable depending on how you implement it. It could be really high depending on how you implement it. In particular, if branch cache is or is not part of that equation. My session tomorrow morning deals with that in more detail around the costs associated with the cloud DP. Now, boundary types. I pause, not just to take a drink. Think about this one for a minute. It's been a hot button lately. Who here has seen the blog post out lately about boundary types? Mosby here has seen it. Several people have seen it. Who in here has really strong opinions about that? Nobody? Nobody has strong opinions about boundary types. Interesting. I was expecting more. What was that? You're tired. Yeah, I understand that. I'm exhausted. My body is not adjusted to Pacific time. I'm still on Central time. I woke up 4:30 this morning. Could not go back to sleep. Now, I'm going to bed at Pacific time, bedtime, but I'm worn out. So, boundary types. You got 3 types available to you. You have AD site boundaries, IP subnet boundaries, IP range boundaries. You have three available to you. There have been, there's a Microsoft guy posted in strong defense of IP subnet boundaries recently. Let's just say the response was comical because real world people were like, it doesn't work that way. And so I'm actually going to go back. There's a session right now as we're sitting here on boundaries. I want to hear what the guy had to say because I'm guessing he's addressing this issue. I'm going to tell you where I currently stand on this. And then, so that's what this session is based on. If I learn more from the session I'm going to listen to later, I'm willing to change this. So, but I'm going by what my experience has been at multiple client locations at this point in time. Okay, so with that said, that's my caveat. Here, let's go. Next slide. So, my primary need for a boundary is to have clear, undeniable control over site assignment and content location. I want to know what site is this guy going to be in if I have more than one site. By the way, if you're a single primary site, you don't need a site assignment boundary type. They're all the same site. Just assign the site when you deploy the client. Who freaking cares? You don't need a site assignment boundary group at that point. But you always need content location boundary groups. So for those content location boundary groups, when I have a guy out over a T1 connection and he has a local DP, I want him to be able to get content from that local DP and not come across looking for it elsewhere. I also don't want anybody at another location coming across that T1 pipe to get content from him. It's a freaking T1 connection. Don't mess with it. I need to have clear control. Secondarily, I want ease of maintenance. But that's secondary. My primary is I got to have undeniable control over where that content comes from. Do you think I get a little juiced about this? So, boundary options, I already mentioned them. Moving on. Why would you choose one over another? Let's move on. Next time. Active Directory. Quite honestly, it depends on how your AD is defined. It depends on how subnets are defined in your Active Directory. I have seen very few Active Directory implementations that made sense to use for content location boundary groups. Almost none. Matter of fact, the only ones that I have seen are a single location. Any place with a WAN connection, I've never seen AD be able to be used because commonly the AD team is using supernets for defining boundaries. Hey, they're all coming back to this domain controller, right? Oh, great. That's like really tiny packages going back and forth about logon stuff. It's not your 4 gig OS image. Yeah, I get screwed that way. So that is, I don't typically recommend AD site boundaries. Subnet boundaries. The key issue is the way the subnet is evaluated. It is evaluated at the client level. If all of your subnet masks are ABC, you're using all 255s in your subnet mask, this actually might work for you. Who in here uses only 255s in your subnet mask? 1, 2, 3, 4. All right. You might could actually use subnet boundaries. Good luck. If you use variable length, good freaking luck. Have fun. Have fun troubleshooting that when you're killing that T1 connection. IP range boundaries. What I like about them, there is zero ambiguity. It just works every single time. It is that IP address between this number and this number? Yep. All right, that's where you are. No ambiguity whatsoever. It just works. Now, with that said, the reason the Microsoft guy posted the blog post 3 or 4 weeks ago was because for larger locations, the subnet boundary is evaluated at the client. It's evaluated on the client. It says, this is my subnet, I know where I am. The IP range boundary is evaluated by the SQL server. So the IP range boundaries do come at a higher SQL processing cost. That's just a given. I don't care. I can beef up the SQL server. Give me more horsepower. That's easy. Having clients come across the T1 connection, it's not acceptable. So until I can be proven wrong about subnets, I'm sticking with IP range at every location. Are they a little bit harder to maintain? Yeah, sometimes. By the way, if you use a script to import those boundaries, make sure everything's right. Make sure all the IP addresses are correct. I had one location that we had a 3-month call with Microsoft to fix this. The script started, one of the ranges started with something to the effect of, I'm just going to count the subnets, 172.5.4.3.1. That's an interesting subnet. It was just a typo, one extra octet, and it stayed in the site control file. Site control file, people will tell you, is the CT0 file in one of the inbox folders. Nope. Yes, that is the site control file. But the actual site control file is in binary form in the database. Good luck. It took Microsoft 3 months to come back with an answer on that one. Okay. Next. Resources slide. I've got links. I got links to all the blog posts that I know on this one. I failed to put in the boundaries session that's happening right now, but you can easily look that up. So do some more research on that. I've got links to all the resources I have on this guy, but on the resources slide in this deck that I'll show up here in just a minute. So this one, like I said, is controversial. My opinion, I want to do what works, what I know works every single time. So summary, there are a lot of ways of doing things in Config Manager. Some of them there is a right way and a wrong way. Some of them there's not. You're going to choose your package and program method based on certain criteria, certain scenarios. You may choose your task sequence stuff based on certain scenarios. Your content location stuff, your boundaries based on certain scenarios that are unique to your environment. But some of them there is a right and a wrong way. The key thing is to make sure that whatever decision you make there is based on both your business requirements and your technical requirements. Always think through business and technical requirements before you implement a change or you design a system. If you don't start by planning, you are going to regret it later. So go ahead and get your business and technical requirements nailed down. The other aspect is be willing to honestly evaluate what your preferred method is against your requirements at your company. Maybe you have a preference that's not right in your environment. I had to do that at a client. They had one single location, fast piped everywhere. I'm talking about boundaries. And they asked me the question, okay, so we got all these subnets, but they're all coming back to the one DP. Why couldn't we just have a single IP range that is 1.0.0.0 to 1.255.255.255? In your scenario, I can't think of a reason why not. Covers everything. But that was unique to that one client. Fast pipe everywhere, actually is one location. So think through that. Resources slide, there's a few sessions up there around hierarchy on config manager and whatnot. That UDB 201 is my session tomorrow morning. The boundary section there, and then the very bottom post is my blog around the shared SQL situation. So, with that said, if you like today's session, I know a lot of you laughed. That's a good sign when you laugh at me. If you like the session, please, by all means, fill out an eval. I would love to see 9s. If you did not, could you forget that the evals exist? So, with that said, questions? There are microphones around the room. Ask questions.
Do you have any...
Thank you.
Do you have any recommendations for using a shared SQL server for all of your system center databases?
So the question is, do I have a recommendation around shared SQL server for all of these system center databases? I've seen companies do that. Evaluate it around your environment. Yeah, I hate to say that. That's your typical consultant answer, unfortunately, because there could be situations where that is perfectly fine. There could be situations where your ops manager team does not want you having access to any of their stuff. There could be stuff around regulatory stuff in your ops manager database or your service manager database that the config manager team shouldn't have access to. So possibly that's okay. If there's any scenario where it would be okay, that's it. So, but definitely if there's any need, concern around the security of any of those databases, I would highly recommend about not doing it. So, yeah.
You talked about when and when not to have a cast, but what's the requirement to have a second primary site?
A second primary site?
Yeah.
So that was... let me cruise back to that slide.
Was it just the number of machines and that sort of stuff?
Basically, it is around scalability. So coming back to here... So that, basically, it is on scalability question. So if you have a scale reason why to do that, I've heard some people talk about, offloading reporting and administration. I think it's a bad idea because I can put a reporting reporting server off separately. I can spin off the role. I don't need a cast for that. I would do it only if you need a second primary for a cast.
Thanks.
So. Yeah, go ahead.
Okay. Just wanted to make sure that you are aware there's a UI element for doing subfolder search in Config Manager Console.
There is?
Yeah, and it is.
I have not seen that.
You have to hit it before you do the search. Unfortunately, if you don't, it's going to clear your search query. But if you hit it, it's up in the upper left-hand corner.
Okay.
On the...
If that's the case, I look like an idiot to about half of you. So, so I still don't like them. I still don't like folders, but
okay.
It's only on the ribbon. So okay, so there is recursive search only on the ribbon. I've been working in it so long. I use right clicks most of the time only. I don't really use the ribbon very much. So all right, that's good to know. I am not infallible. So yeah, absolutely. That's odd. Yeah.
I'm just looking for some clarification on the DFS share thing. You said that if you change the source location of the content of the source location, that the packages will all redistribute.
Yep. If you
In
have a package
Configuration
program,
Manager 2007, it does a delta check, and all it does is report back a new version from the distribution point. Is that different in 2012?
So I have seen this thing where you change the source and it automatically distributed. I have seen
It
that
will
myself.
automatically initiate a distribution, but it doesn't actually copy out any content.
Okay.
Is that the way? Is it different, or?
I could be mistaken on that, but I
Okay.
thought it actually redistributed. I could be mistaken.
Okay, I'll check into it. I was just wanting
Yeah.
to make sure.
Yeah.
Thanks.
She's been standing here.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Any recommendations for fallback sites?
For a fallback site, yeah, you do need a fallback site. Typically, that fallback site is going to be at your main location, because I'm assuming your main location is the one that has the best connection to all of your other locations. And so that typically is where your fallback site would be, is at your whatever location has the best WAN pipe. If you have multiple locations with that WAN, like I've got a client that has 3 locations connected by 200 meg and higher to the MPLS, and so all 3 of those DPs were listed as fallback DPs, and so you can do it that way.
What critical function does the fallback site give you?
Basically, if you have a client at a remote site that can't get content, and the package is set, or the deployment is set to say, if it's not local, go get it from a remote DP anyway, the fallback DP is where it would get it from.
Thank you.
Yep.
I had a question surrounding our script installers. I noticed that you said that we should still use packages for that. Why? I understand that there's usually logic built into our scripts, but why can't we put those in as an application as well, so they can install like as application steps in a task sequence?
Config Manager is a fantastic double clicker. It'll happily double click whatever you tell it to, whether it be a package or program or application. Knock yourself out.
I mean, is there...
There's no reason why you can't use your script installer in an application.
Okay.
It's just going to double click it, but that double click is going to be based on whatever requirements and criteria you put in the application. So in particular, the only one that's required, by the way, is detection method. So the requirements tab, not required. You don't have to put any requirements there at all.
Right.
You don't have to put any dependencies at all or supersedence. You do have to put a detection method. So that's the only one that's actually required in the app model.
Okay. Thank you.
Yep. By the way, Microsoft would probably hate to hear me say that Config Manager is a fantastic double clicker. I'm sure they cringe at that, but it is. Just be careful what you tell it to double click, or you could end up imaging your data center. Yeah.
I just had a question about the app model example you gave, where you showed the detection method of you were looking at the version greater than or equal to. Is that what you would typically do, or do you let the MSI product code?
Good question. Fantastic question. I meant to bring this out. I did not follow all of my demo script when I got to that part. So I have an example of XML Notepad, which is an MSI-based install.
Okay.
On this guy, when I go to the deployment type on it, it's an MSI. And when you import an MSI, the detection method is based on the MSI product code. So that would be the preferred method for an MSI. So because my example application was notepad.exe, I had to go other ways. Your other detection methods could be a registry key, either registry key or a value, and then whether the value is a certain thing or whether it just exists. File just exists, or is a certain version, file date, various things like that, or custom script. Run this script, does all this kind of weird stuff, and that's how I know it exists.
Right, yeah, we typically leave it like this as well, but we run into issues if somebody installs a newer version, or if it's an app that updates itself, and then this tries to detect, we have it every hour, and it says, oh, it's not installed anymore, and tries to reinstall, and it fails because the newer version's installed. So we kind of have this balancing act between,
The detection method can be a little tricky at times. Now, interestingly, I could put multiple things in here. If any of these 5 things exist, the app's installed. Or I'm going to say it's installed. For that matter, I could say, if you find the MSI GUID for XML Notepad, assume that Notepad++ is installed, or Office is installed, or whatever.
Yeah, the other concern I'd have
Totally
with saying greater than or equal to or doing something like that is could be a little misleading in reporting. You think a specific version's installed, but it's actually a newer version or something.
Now, your reporting, though, should be based around inventory, not based on this.
Okay, yeah.
Your inventory is totally based on what comes back from either hardware or software inventory.
Makes sense. Thanks.
Okay. Yep.
Going back to SQL, do you have any documentation around having a SQL cluster set up that has a public certificate? We're having a challenge with actual SCCM using the public certificate on the SQL server. We have to continually every night reset the permissions on it until we get Premier to figure out why it's not solving the problem. And they have no documentation.
I do not, but come down here. There's a few of my other consultant buddies are down here. They might have an answer to that. So come on down and we'll see if we can help you.
Okay.
Offhand, though, no, I don't. Yeah.
Hey, it looks like distribution points has a lot of power on 2012. My question is, when should I use secondary sites versus distribution points?
Okay, that is a bigger question than what we have time for today. My session tomorrow morning addresses that in great detail. But basically, what you're coming to, the short answer to that question is it depends. It's based around the upward flow of client data. So a secondary, a distribution point, because they can do scheduling and throttling now, it eliminates a lot of the need for a secondary site. Quite honestly, I have no inside information on this, but it would not surprise me if secondary sites cease to exist at some point. Because a lot of the functionality that they're adding into the distribution point is what you used to have a secondary site for. Do I know that's going to happen? Absolutely not. It would not surprise me, though. You have less and less need for a secondary site. Where it comes is when you look at the combination of the client count compared to that WAN connection back to your main location or back to your primary site. You have to. There's an art to that. There's a little bit of science, a lot of art to it, of figuring out. Okay, that location has X number of clients. It's a T1 line. Maybe it's a secondary site. Especially if that WAN is saturated, that comes into play. So it's available bandwidth, client count, and then all that data going up, and then what kind of data and how often. So how often are you doing hardware inventory? How often are you doing software scans or software update scans, software inventory? All of that kind of stuff plays into that around how much data is going up the path. But in a nutshell, it's that upward flow of client data is why you would need a secondary site.
So basically, everything I do on secondary sites, such as Pixie or SD, I can also do on distribution points?
I didn't understand you.
So everything I do on secondary sites, like OSD, Pixie, security update, I can do on distribution points?
That can all be distribution points. I've got multiple clients that very few secondary sites going in now. My session tomorrow is a case study of a location of a company that had 15,000 clients and 55 or more locations, and at the end they had 7 secondary sites. 10:15. Okay. Ballroom F, Mandalay F.
Okay, thank you.
Yep. Yes, sir.
Yes, for
Yeah.
for boundary groups.
Everybody else, come on up here.